When the White House asks broadcast networks to break into prime time to carry a presidential speech, it's a big deal. It's not like cable news with a 24-hour maw to fill. So when President Trump asked this week, there was plenty of hand-wringing over what to do.
An Oval Office address is different. It sets a tone of high-stakes urgency, something of immediate necessity.
Why in the world would the networks run Donald Trump's address tonight when we know that Donald Trump is going to be using it to spread these lies?
The answer to that, says CNN's Brian Stelter, came from a TV exec in a private text. Because we are damned if we do and damned if we don't.
They felt cornered. He demonizes the media. If they refuse, it's going to be, see, they're all biased. It's all fake news.
Others argue just let the president speak. Don't prejudge.
Every website, every newspaper, every network can come on and say, here's what was wrong, here's what was misleading, here's our analysis.
And that's pretty much what happened.
All heroin, many fact checks have shown, comes through legal points of entry.
In fact, the number of undocumented crossings over the southern border has been steadily down over the last 10 years.
But if judgments about President Trump's claims were harsh, that was nothing compared to criticism of the networks for carrying the address. The New York Times' James Poniewozik wrote, they made a gutless decision over fear of a rage tweet. The Atlantic's James Fallows wrote that the networks blew the call, while the Washington Post's Margaret Sullivan took it one step further, saying all the fact-checking in the world can't make a dent in the spread of misinformation. In other words, the network should have protected the people from the president.
That's the sanctimony of this criticism that I can't stand. Margaret Sullivan and James Poniewozik, it's just crazy. This was a simple decision as far as I'm concerned, and the networks made the right call. And by the way, we're talking about the networks, not the cable outfit. Of course the cables were going to carry it. But for the networks to break into prime time at the height of a season, it's a big deal. And it has nothing to do with ratings for all of you people who think it's not a ratings issue at all. It's right. It's a political decision on the parts of the networks. And they made the right one. It's the first time the president has asked for an address from the Oval Office. It won't be the last. President Obama got plenty of speeches from the Oval Office. He was denied one, although he never made a formal request. He just said he wanted to talk about DACA, and he floated the idea to the networks, but he never asked them for it. So I thought they made, it was an easy and clear-cut call.
I tend to agree with that. I think it, that old saying about hurt me once, shame on you, hurt me twice, shame on me. Yeah. I think, okay, he hurt me once. And shame on him for doing that, for asking for, again, to speak to the nation in a matter of national urgency, national emergency. And it wasn't. So then if the networks again agree to that, well, shame on them for falling for it. So I think in some ways this could come back to hurt President Trump way more than he may have perceived. But I tend to agree. It's an easy call. I frankly, what was the cost? And the cost was Mr. and Mrs. Middle America didn't get to watch 7 minutes of Lord knows what kind of silly situation comedy, excuse me for saying that out there, and they missed some ads being directed at them. I frankly don't think that the hurt was a real foul.
Well, first of all, Dean, situation comedies are supposed to be silly, okay? That's the whole idea.
Right. So was this news conference.
And those sitcoms have put a lot of people's kids through college, okay? Yeah. So having said that, I basically agree. There's no reason why these requests can't be taken on a case-by-case basis. Yeah. As you pointed out, one Obama request was rejected by the networks as not really making news and just strictly political. This was this president's first such request, 7 minutes. Again, it's not like he wanted a whole half hour. It does kind of amuse me in a sad sort of way that such importance is put on this decision, when I guarantee you most people who saw all or part of this live or later in clip form didn't do it on CBS, ABC, NBC. They did it on cable, on their phones, on YouTube, or what have you. The world has changed, and it's just not quite as momentous a decision as it once might have been.
Well, I wrote my WGBH news column about this week, and I agree with all of you. You're not going to turn down the president on his very first request for prime time. It just doesn't make any sense. And we were in the midst of a crisis. I mean, it's a crisis of President Trump's own making, but nevertheless, it was a crisis over the government shutdown.
You didn't even mention that.
And
I just very briefly. Yeah.
No, and I think that it was appropriate. Now, that doesn't mean that they should give him his request every time. Not only was President Obama turned down once, but George W. Bush was turned down just 2 months after 9/11. So the networks do sometimes stand up and say, we're not going to do this, but not the first time.
If the networks hadn't shown it, the network viewers wouldn't have seen Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi standing so close together that you couldn't pray that.
And yet so far.
So that was the unusual part of it, that they actually carried that.
Yeah. And I think
never
that makes
happened.
sense.
No, it's happened once before. After President Obama gave an Oval Office address about health care, House Speaker John Boehner was allowed to respond. But you're right, that's only once.
And they do the stupid rebuttal to the State of the Union.
Every
year.
I think the aggressive fact-checking, given the president's proclivities for saying things that are not true, made complete sense. And it seems, from what I've seen, like the networks and the cable networks as well did a good job with that. That's hard to do in real time, to be that quick. And I think people are rising to the challenge. What I had a hard time with was that off-the-record or background. It's not entirely clear which it was, that lunch that the president had with various TV luminaries on the day of the speech, where he said, I don't even want to be giving the speech. You know? I'm not going to say anything in the speech, but they're making me give it. I don't get the value in participating in that kind of a sit-down, the news value. Chris Cuomo, I think, was on CNN saying, oh, you know, the president was resolute and determined like I've never seen him before, and if he could make the case he did, you know, the way he did in that off-the-record lunch, he'd be able to sell his wall. I just don't get what the point of that is. I feel like the press got played by letting him give two messages in a way.
Yeah, he wants to sell them on it, or at least be a little bit more convincing that he knows he's going to be able to do by reading the prompter.
And that's the kind of thing you can very easily, without fear of pushback, say, no, we're not going to be there. Thanks.
Yeah, but he then stepped on his own message
immediately
saying that this is all a scam, folks, including my photo op down on the border. So whatever message he hoped to get across that might have been persuasive, he polluted it completely.
But it's not the network's job to protect, the people from the president. It's just crazy.